Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to this second chapter of the series on innovative education for unshaped futures. As you know, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation of higher education. After a year of adapting the sudden disruption of higher education and pivoting operations of increasingly rely on digital technologies in higher education, the new constant is uncertainty and a need for resilience to respond to a fast-changing environment. Within this context, the International Association of Universities and the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, Open University of Catalonia, have partnered to develop a series to explore some of the changes that we are currently observing in higher education. This is the main reason of this series of webinars that are divided into 6 chapters of 1 hour, exploring different levels of change and moving from broader topics to more specific areas in the second part of the series. Each chapter includes perspectives from an online and a campus-based university, and the full program is available in the website. The series are open to all, and the recordings will be made available online after each session. Today, we are going to talk about assessment practices in hybrid and online higher education scenarios. Assessment has become a sort of nightmare for those that didn't experience online education before, trying to deal with the remote teaching systems which were supposed to be online education. Today's presenters are 2 experts in the field of assessment and evaluation, and we will go from the concepts to the practice with few or no transition. So it's my pleasure today to moderate this session and to introduce Professor Nati Cabrera, Professor and Director of the University Oberta of the Catalunya, and Professor Henrik Johansson from Stockholm University in Sweden. So we are going to start with Professor Johansson, and we are going to tell a bit about him. He is professor at the Department of Computer and System Sciences at the Stockholm University. He got a PhD in education, and he has been researcher and coordinator of 17 international projects. He has supervised more than 150 bachelor theses and master theses, and currently 10 PhD students too. And his research has been carried out in more than 30 countries. He's the developer of SciPro thesis management system and the founder and coordinator of the ICT for Inclusion, Integration and Development Network. So, Professor Hanson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Albert, and welcome to my apartment in Sweden, everybody from Thailand and Jordan I saw here. I will now share my screen. I hope it works. Oh, sorry, I have to start from the beginning like that. Yeah, so the topic today is assessment practices in hybrid and online higher education scenarios. It's actually the most boring task for a professor to assess people and who want to be assessed. It's really not what you like to do, but what everybody have to do. But I like to balance this a bit, that you don't need to work so hard with assessment if you have everything else in place from the beginning. Or I would even argue that you can start assessing before the course starts. I need to move your faces and my own video here. I think you don't see it, but I do. Yeah, so first, since we are having a global audience here, I want to say something about the world. It's not one world, actually. It is several, and I will explain why. And some of the key concepts when I designed my assessments. And then I will talk particularly about the higher education, more complex task of assessing bachelor, master, and PhD theses and how to monitor and do that with some practice, experience, and results. And then Albert asked me to have some ideas about the future, and I have it in the end. So it is not one world. I'm now processing a survey about COVID impact on education with 104 countries responding, 12,800 respondents. And I could see that we are not talking about the same thing, because we have countries, regions with very good, high quality infrastructure like myself here. And that is not an issue. But if you don't have that, that's always an issue with low quality internet and computers not up to date and so on. That's the main problem for many. And then we actually have also groups and regions which has no infrastructure at all, rural areas. Every country has internet, but not everywhere. So I think it could be very close to the electricity map where you have good infrastructure, internet. And here is the, in a comparative way, you can see that in New Zealand, nothing really, little changed because they were already online. They were doing this since many years. But if you look at Afghanistan, they have no electricity. So they were completely, the lockdown had very different impacts. For us in Sweden, actually, we increased the number of students by 14%. So we didn't, we were actually accelerating because I gained 3 hours by not commuting to work. So I had a lot of extra time and could be more productive. But if internet is not there and system is not there, it is not very productive. So in higher education, I think it's important to always have in mind that it's a balance between creativity and control. Creativity, I mean, otherwise you don't do something new. You don't really have a question or a problem that is of interest to study. It's both in research and learning. And if it's boring and it's just control, it's too much. It's not fun for anyone. But if you have a very creative start, then you don't need to control that much because you have interested students and researchers for that matter too. And then you have inner drive, which means that in lockdown, actually, the ones who have inner drive and motivation, you don't need to control them. They will deliver better results than actually in campus. But if you don't, you have to have other measures. I will talk about efficiency, quality, and what Albert said, there are common problems, even though I started with say we are not starting from the same starting point, but we have common problems. We all are in universities and need to do these things. And what really matters, I will talk about how to scale communication and without burning out, because communication is learning. Without communication, you really don't have a teacher-student interaction role. I will also talk about freedom, flexibility, and structure, because if you have a structure supporting you, digital structure, many uses ad hoc systems like Facebook, SMS, and not really for education, and that is not giving the structure you need to save time and do the right feedback and so on. But if you have that, you can be very free. We have teachers working from California, we have people everywhere, and they decide when they want to do things. It's really a good situation. So I will talk about the more complex higher education tasks, namely individual exam work at bachelor, master, and PhD levels. And one thing to make more meaning is to align these works to a more broader context. They are usually working alone, but actually each of the 17 SDGs is a research area where you can connect students and researchers globally, locally, and nationally. So that's the context. And then idea development, it's very important to let the student come up with some ideas. And that is what I say, assessing before the course starts. Before you do a PhD, you have to know what is the issue, what is the question, what is the problem. And that is the creativity part of this task. Sometimes that can be very hard for students and they need help. And then it is to implement the student project. And there I have a lot of mechanisms to monitor and assess. It's more of assessment there. I will quickly jump to this because it's about assessment, but I like the creativity part more. So I will give you some slides, but it will be very fast. So here is one slide, how we start. We start with an idea bank online where students are providing ideas aligned to the SDGs, and we have ideas from the wider society, which means that they are belonging to a bigger context. And this idea bank is the starting point for a thesis, bachelor, master. And the semester before they start doing this thesis, they only do provide an idea, or they pick an idea from a supervisor. In this way, we can match supervisor students in 1 hour, 700 students and 90 supervisors. So this is my little vision here, that actually we could have these idea banks and alignment in the whole world, actually. And we can have ideas from many different stakeholders to this idea bank. I will not take too much time here, but I will show you specifically how it looks. You know, you can add ideas, you can sort them, you can search them, you can according to SDG or research area, or if it's open or private, if it's a master thesis or something else. And here is a very simple template how you do this. And there's a library with tools, and you exit this idea bank and evaluate, assess it also if it's a feasible project plan. That's the exit from the idea bank. And then we could have statistics relating to how many projects is going on in Catalonia, in Stockholm, in Rwanda, in Thailand, and so on. Together, we could have communities here. And this is, now I come to my experience. This is a bit older version, but this is my department only. We have 1,819 ideas related to research waiting for bachelor and master students, which is a huge resource. And imagine if we could do that on a bigger scale, then we have a huge manpower for SDG work, which is never going to be funded in this way. But the universities has the manpower and methods, but not always the issues. So now I will jump from this starting point of the ideas to how we have been able to scale our thesis work with about 1,000% completion rate. I mean, 944% more completions of bachelor and master theses and higher quality. But these were the goals. We need to save time, we need to increase quality, and so on. And it is to provide a structure to the unstructured process. Here is some data that 2008, we had 57 low quality theses completed. 2014, we have 559 high quality theses completed. That is an increase with 944%. And it's a number of theses this is published in the study. So, and this is the quality. We had AB, this is the Bologna scale, excellent here, very few, and a lot of low quality. But we increased the quality and have very little low quality now. So how did we do this then? This is a proof of concept. You said I have supervised 150, but actually I supervised 400 students now. So this is my students' personal supervision. And this is the department here. And we have been thinking of multiple perspectives, the supervisor, the student, and the university and the wider society when we did this. And here is how it looks like when you're logged in as a supervisor. It's a dummy, but here the projects and the milestones and the progress, so your students know how much they have done and how much they have left and so on. I see that I have to maybe speed up a little bit. There is a progress estimated timeline, and this is the students' timeline, and this is how you are doing in relation to the rest of the students. And there are self-evaluation checklists. You don't need to write to everyone what you need to do in each phase. You are marking it yourself here. And all questions are coming to each student. You don't need to repeat that. And you don't supervise until the student have done all of the things. There is a template with different phases, and if you're overdue or if you have done this and that, it's very easy to run quite a number of works. And you should always, in the end, as I said, there is a balance between creativity and control in higher education, in everything. In a course, it has to be interesting, but you have to control that they're really doing it well too. So the idea bank is the creativity, and in the end, the control part also consists of an oral component. So here is how you book the final oral seminar, which could be like this. You book a Zoom in defense of the thesis. So when they upload it, and the opponent can register online, and we get this plagiarism control thing automatically here. And here now I'm coming to this little bit more boring topic, which I have to talk about assessment. But this is a kind of a marathon with hurdles. So the student need to know this is our hurdles for a thesis. You have to have a first meeting. If you're not there, it's strange that you have to have it as a milestone, but you have to have your project plan approved. You have to do a peer review. You have to send blah, blah, blah. So these are things that they have to do, and the milestone is ticking. You have to be an opponent, etc. So they should know what they should do from the start. And when they know that they have no problem doing it because the checklist is there. What shall I do for the project plan, etc. And then I just check this if it's fine. So actually we have my bachelor students now, they finish 2 weeks earlier than, I mean, it's just 10 weeks. So it is really a different situation now than it was before. Then we have a online grading module where we mark in different criteria for having 1 point you have to have for the abstract. It has to be this, and then another section, method section, and state different things. And then it's automatically calculating to 7-grade scale, Bologna scale, which I don't really like. I like the 3-grade, but that we couldn't do it in the European Union because the Nordic universities, they wanted 3 grades, but the southern, like in Spain, you wanted 20. So there's a political compromise, I think, the Bologna scale. Anyway, it's calculated here if you get A, B, C, and so on. Personally, I like to have this is fine, this is excellent, and this is not up to standard. So I think three levels is enough, but that's another discussion. So now I think I'm pretty good in time actually for questions also. But since Albert said that I should say something about the future, some recommendations. And I would say that even though we have different point of departure because of the internet, basically, but also because of we have some don't, even if you have internet, you might not have the digital systems needed. And even if you have the systems, you might have very resistant teachers. So it's never the students, it's always the teachers. Anyway, so there is a capacity building thing also. But anyway, everybody has the same problem, I think, with getting quality, meaning, and relevance of the most important product of a university, namely the individual exam work, which should be individual. It shouldn't be like a course that everybody comes with the same result, the same book. It should be also showing that you can apply your knowledge from courses with scientific methods, with your own data. And in Sweden, the national agency that is controlling universities, they are only looking at the theses. If the thesis is good, then everything else is good. But if the thesis is bad, you have a bad education. So it's very, very important that we produce these works in a good way. Yeah, so my suggestions here is capacity building online, which builds on needs. Consider the 3 worlds. It's no point having capacity building if you don't have certain tools or internet and so on. But I think you can very easily do ask needs basis. Just have one email and ask them what they need, and then base clustering, have online capacity building based on that. But it should also be individualized, so we can, but that we can do with tools. Then I think that when I look into this study, which I don't have time to talk about, I think it's a misunderstanding to talk about content. There's never been as much content as there is now. You can find so much online with high quality, Shakespeare, black holes, everything. It's about structure, how to structure and how to be able to do something with this content. And that is a different thing. I don't have time to develop that, but I have 6 structures, which I think is important. Rather than actually content. And that's the pedagogue work. Let's see here. I think we could do interesting co-supervision internationally together. I think we can really accelerate the SDG work by just connecting our students' independent work and have ideas exchanging. I think we can do research within the SDG also in the communities online, because that's the structure that we can all accept, regardless of religion, ideology, etc. Everybody wants smart cities, clean water, and so on. But and we should do research. I mean, we're not paid otherwise. Actually, that's what we do at universities. You combine it with research and impact, not only papers. But we need someone with a vision, and we need funding, and we need someone leading, and that's my end point here, is that I think, oh, what happened now? Something happened with my screen. I have to just a second. I have just a second left, but I lost the page. Sorry. It is not good. Just let me finish the last thing. I think that was the page. I don't know what happened, but I was here.
Okay, now.
Yeah, so I was saying here in the end that I think Trine, Albert, and UNESCO should take the lead to do this in a coordinated way. And yeah, I could do something, maybe. I stopped there, Albert. If there is any questions, or maybe there is nobody think it's interesting. There's no mic. No, you don't have the mic on.
Thank you very much, Professor Hansson. You've been very, very exact on the time that was allocated for your presentation. So thank you very much for that too. And now it's time for giving the floor to Professor Nati Cabrera. She's Associate Professor at the Open University of Catalonia, Department of Psychology and Education, in which she's been former Deputy Dean of Teaching. She's also the Director of the Master's Program on Quality Management and Evaluation in Higher Education. She's a researcher, member of the EduLab Research Group, and she has participated in a number of international and national research projects, mainly aiming on organizational and policy aspects, and specifically on assessment and evaluation of online education. So, Professor Cabrera, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much, Professor Sangrà, for the introduction. Thank you also to Professor Hansson for his inspiring talk. I am going to focus my talk on students' assessment, learning assessment. And I'll start with the most common beliefs and conceptions that we have and how they condition our practices and the use we make of technology, both in hybrid and online context. Let's start it. Sorry. Just a little bit of context, in fact, about the evolution of education. In fact, there has been no evolution for years, for centuries of education in general and higher education in particular. And then the evolution that the education has undergone in the last 2 decades, especially blended learning and online education, is considerable, with new ways of teaching and learning, and with another approach that it's called student-centered pedagogical approach. As has already been shown in the previous presentation, and as a result of the confinements caused by the pandemic, most universities have also had to use technology intensively in order to continue teaching. In this way, for some universities, this use has been something new, and for others, it has meant an adaptation of what they had already been doing. In any case, this intensive use of technology in teaching and the challenges posed assessment related not only to technological, nor only educational, but also ethical, safety, inclusion, and among others. But this context also raises opportunities, such as using technology to improve teaching processes from the pedagogical point of view. And among these processes, the assessment processes stand out. Rethink student assessment, its purpose, its role in educational process is a great opportunity to relaunch higher education that really is able to transform people to make the best of themselves. What concerns us the most about the student assessment, I think, depends mainly on our conception of evaluation, as I mentioned before. So, surely all of us understand that as teachers, or when we adopt the role of teacher, we must evaluate whether our students learn or not. It is an important function which merits the trust of students, the university, society, and so on. The teacher accredits that the student knows something at a certain level. When we move in this meaning of evaluation, of assessment, what we do as teachers is to focus the evaluation on a specific content in which the student memorizes or understands it, and we are able to carry out an evaluation activity and assessment activity at the end of our lectures or after providing them with a PDF content to check if they know it or not. So assessment is content-centered, try to measure the quantity, the quality, the level of the content students know, the knowledge. We do assessment generally at the end of the process or in a specific ending moment. And our main reason why we assess student learning is for accreditation, because this is our main function as teachers. At least it used to be the most important one in other times. And all of this is important, and it's still important right now. But if we limit assessment to prove theoretical knowledge in general, we are making very poor use of assessment, because assessment has great potential if we direct it to the learning, to the development of skills and competences. In this context, the type of answers we seek from technology have to do with aspects as student control, identity, authorship, what means proctoring techniques that allow monitoring and watch over students while doing assessment activities, or anti-plagiarism software as well. it is not clear anyway that there are more student cheats in online assessment than in face-to-face one. We will have to think about it. Management and technology affordances is another issue. Both institutions and teachers wonder if we can cope with technology we are considered using. What potential does it have? What are the profits, the benefits? How easy is it to use? How reliable? How to manage, protect the information that is generated? Feasibility or scalability, as Professor Hansson mentioned before, of technological solution, and feasibility also of teaching is one of our concerns too. Taking into account the specific context, we have aspects such as connection, number of people, attendance, available resources, and also teacher workload, the digital skills of teachers, etc. Reproduction of assessment process from face-to-face to virtually as reliable as possible is something that often happens when people are more face-to-face experienced. If we share the idea of assessment for learning, not of learning, but for learning or formative assessment, we do not renounce what has been said before. What happened is that we think that it's not enough, that evaluation, assessment can also be a learning strategy, the main learning strategy we can use. So, in addition to what has been said before, we are moving towards a design that favors a continuous support of our students, during which we are providing them with the qualitative information they will need about their learning process if they want to improve, to enhance it. This kind of assessment is always competence-based. That means that not only theoretical content is important, that is, but also what the students do with it. In this context, the type of answer we seek have to do with aspects such as how to apply content knowledge to problem solving, evaluating situations, elaborate proposals, developing competencies. We need to design cognitive and metacognitive activities, complex, meaningful, situated activities, activities that allow us and students to develop competencies and allow us to observe this development. Formative assessment that integrates formative feedback as well in order to improve student learning. Finally, if we understand that assessment as learning, we go even a little bit further. I mean, in addition to designing activities that promote learning in terms that I have explained, we believe that the role of the student has to be active, not only in relation to learning, that it must be also, but also in relation to assessment. The main challenges posed by this approach are also the quality of tasks of our activities, the effective feedback, but we add student participation. Student self-regulated learning will take place because we are not the only assessment responsible anymore. The student also takes responsibility for his assessment learning process. He's the protagonist, an active agent on the evaluation process, and not a mere passive agent. Assessment takes place within the learning process, not only at the end. We can find many resources and references. For example, this pair that I share with you in the slide at the right side from Conrad and Donaldson, and another from Laureat, which can help us to select the most appropriate methods and activities, online activities for each purpose. Here, I show you a classification of these activities, online activities, made by my colleagues Wadi and Meine from the UOC, according to the purpose, which is closely linked to the skills and competencies that the students must develop. In Europe and in many other higher education contexts, we have been talking about complex learning competencies for years, and not only about mere memorization of content. We are all moving more or less convinced, more or less fast, towards assessment as learning. And in this context, the elements that we must take into account to be able to assess learning activities, online activities, in fact, in an educational model, would be the following, but the order is not necessarily chronological, since the process is always iterative. What complex knowledge, what competencies are we working on, developing, learning? What learning outcomes related to these competencies are the chosen activities? Are we expecting students to achieve? What learning activities or tasks are the most appropriate to facilitate students to develop these competencies? What evidence of learning is going to be produced that can be observed, valued by the teacher or whoever evaluates? What assessment criteria is this evidence going to be evaluated? Criteria that must be shared with the students from the very beginning of the learning activities. What feedback will be generated, when, on what aspects, and how it will be facilitated, that the students not only receive it, but also understand it, assimilate it, and use it to enhance their learning. How will self-regulated learning of students be promoted? Strategies as self-evaluation or peer-to-peer evaluation can be good allies. The degree of synchrony and asynchrony required related to time and also space. Time depending on the learning outcomes we plan to achieve, the student's profile and the context of application. And the need of presence or not of some of the learning actions plan. The decision would be based on the same elements, the context, the student profiles, the objectives we plan to achieve. Analyzing whether presence or no presence provide more or less benefits to the process. So obviously, all these can be developed in a hybrid and in an online scenario. The question would be, what is the best option and what role does technology play in all this? How can we design these hybrid or online learning scenarios so that we get the most out of the assessment? When deciding on synchrony or asynchrony, I think we can agree that in an hybrid scenario, we can design practices in person and online assessment activities, or that are part face-to-face and part online. The million-dollar question would be, why do we decide that an activity is better to do in person or online? If the answer has to do with the need of temporal synchrony, for example, to interact with the student, observe their response capacity at the moment, etc., now we all know that online learning allows this temporal synchrony without problems, so it could be not be reason enough to justify a face-to-face option, although, of course, there may be other reasons. If the answer has to do with uses of identity control, authorship, etc., the question would be, do face-to-face systems have more guarantees than online ones, and they are more reliable? But what is really relevant from my point of view would be, do we choose to do face-to-face or online assessment activity because this is how our students learn more or better, or because I feel more confident doing an exam or face-to-face activity? Understanding that a true formative assessment can enhance students' learning, but can also be the guarantee that many of the aspects that concern us regarding identity control and authorship are deactivated simply because the learning activities, assessment activities as well, that are developed are difficult to plagiarize because they are not content-based. There is a continuity throughout the progress, throughout the performance of the activity that creates a link between a student and teacher that makes it difficult for the student to be supplanted without the teacher noticing. So it is worth designing and implementing online formative assessment practices that meet all these characteristics we have been talking about. Deciding on technology. In these presentations, we cannot and do not intend to cover all the educational technologies that exist and that can be applied for evaluation purposes. The most useful, I think, it is not this. The most useful thing is to know how to select the technology. So let me say a few words about technology, specifically on how to choose it. The first thing, as we have been saying through the presentation, is to take into account the pedagogical criteria, which have to do with the type of learning activity, a tool that responds to the competence learning outcomes we want to develop to achieve. Teachers and students must be digitally competent, at least at the basic level. We have to check the adaptability of the tool to different needs, specifically the needs of the students, personalization, and also check the flexibility of the tool, greater flexibility, greater creative possibilities, both for teachers and students. We also have to take into account some technical criteria as usability, license cost, if there is, cross-platform or interoperability, security and privacy, ability to produce content in multiple formats, if there is the layout templates that facilitate content creation, and if it's periodically updated. But having the technology and making it accessible does not guarantee a good use of it. There is another important issue we should keep in mind. Let me share with you the European Framework for Digital Skills in Education. This framework helps us to visualize the path that teachers, students, professionals, and all those involved in educational processes must follow in order to be digitally competent. It is true that digital technologies can enhance and improve teaching and learning strategies in many different ways, but we must be digital competent to take advantage of the use of technology, all teachers and students. However, whatever pedagogical strategy or approach is chosen, the educator's specific digital competence lies in effectively orchestrating the use of digital technologies in the different phases and settings of the learning and the assessment process. As you can see on the right side, the fundamental competence in these areas of assessment has to do with things that we have already talked about. Assessment strategies, to use digital technology for formative and summative assessment, to enhance the diversity and sustainability of assessment formats and approaches, analyzing evidence, feedback and planning, to use digital technologies to provide target and timely feedback to learners and to adapt teaching strategies and to provide target support, and to enable learners to understand the evidence provided by digital technologies and use it for decision making. To summarize, some conclusions or key ideas about what to do when thinking and designing a learning assessment. And let me use the Zimmerman 3 dimensions, an adaptation of it, to describe a self-regulated learning process, because what we do while teaching, while designing learning scenarios, is also a learning process that allows us to enhance teaching and learning. The first dimension would be planning, where decision-making takes place. Designing learning and assessment activities should be a single process. Technology can inspire us, but pedagogy is what should drive our decisions. The second dimension would be judgment, where we collect and assess evidence. Learning evidence is everything that can show that the student has achieved one or more learning outcomes linked to the competencies development. The third dimension would be monitoring, where feedback and reflection take place. What is important about feedback is not only its contents, but the reflection it promotes in a student, the decision he makes, the improvement that are integrated. The responsibility for assessment is not now shared. And let's say a new way of understanding living assessment is possible, accepting the need of summative assessment, but following formative assessment as the main learning strategy. With all these elements we mentioned before, continuous assessment, situated and transferable learning, variety of assessment strategies, consistent, concrete and clear assessment criteria, continuous monitoring, providing opportunities for improvement, promoting participation and involvement of a student with the appropriate technology, balancing synchrony and asynchrony. Because, as David Boss said, already in the 19th, students can escape by teaching, but they cannot escape by assessment. So let's do the best we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Cabrera. It has been also just in time, so thank you both of you for being so strict on that. And then we have now some minutes in order to receive the questions from our audience and to discuss some of these questions between you and them. So let me have a look at the questions that are currently. We are expecting more questions at the end of the presentation of Professor Cabrera, of course, because usually most of the questions are arriving in the end of each of the speeches. Initially, there were some questions that Professor Hanson also answered through the chat, but I think that it's interesting to ask in general, so to give Professor Hansson also the opportunity for express the answer to all of the people who is attending it. One of the questions that I think that are quite general is that someone asked us about academic integrity and prevent plagiarism are closed, but some students could cheat by outsourcing the work another one. In an online context, it is easy. How to prevent such things? I think that both of you could answer because both of you have said some ideas about that. But Professor Hansson, would you like to start by saying some words about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a little bit different if you have a course with, 500 people, or if, as I'm doing, I'm supervising a lot of students, but in doing so, I'm in constant contact with them. So I see the work evolves. You can't really outsource something because then suddenly the text is different, the grammar is different, and every day there is some little bit there. And if you talk to someone, they have to understand it. So in supervision with frequent contact, I never seen this happen. And we have very clear, it's very difficult to do outsource small bits and know what to say. And I can test with you, Albert. Who was the third king of Sweden? you can't Google now because you have only 1 second. I mean, if it's asynchronous, you could find it out. But if I ask a student, they can never cheat because I need just a question or two. And I want to say also that I'm not doing the systems I showed you it's blended, you know. It is I also talk to students. There is something there. That's why it's also on campus and face to face, and it's always also oral speech.
Yeah, Professor Cabrera, what do you think about it?
Thank you. I would add from my perspective, there are three possible strategies. Anti-plagiarism strategies. The first one would be the activity, the design of the activity. There are activities that is very difficult to plagiate because what you are asking the student to do is contextualize in a specific context or a school or company or whatever, because you change the ideas, or you make a student make the questions, as Professor Hansson mentioned before, or whatever. The fact is that how you design the activity can make it impossible to make plagiarism in this. The second would be the prevention of plagiarism by talking about in the classroom, in the virtual classroom or face-to-face classroom, and talk about with your students and explain to them how to cite the authors, how to make the references, and almost how is important to do this. What does it mean in terms of respect for the other's creation and whatever. And the last thing would be have a good anti-plagiarism tool that exists in the market. So it would be another strategy too.
So as a summary of for this question, we probably you both agree on the fact that the first thing is to think on how to ask questions and what to ask. And this is asking the people to do different things and not necessarily cheating at this particular level. So it means to change the way we are usually asking questions to the students in order to make them be examined. And the second thing is to have a good design for this process. So I think these are the two ideas that we can identify in that, because there are other questions very similar to that. But I will skip to another one that I think is also quite interesting. And someone asked about to what extent are we supposed to be transparent regarding the grading policy, which is the inevitable post-assessment part. In an online environment, it's like playing all our cards. So do you think is that fine? Maybe Dr. Cabrera, you could start in that sense, because it's quite concluding, asking for the situation in an online environment. You are muted. You are muted.
I'm sorry, but I can't hear you very well. Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course. To what extent are we supposed to be transparent regarding the grading policy, the marking, which is inevitable post-assessment part? In an online environment, it's like playing all our cards, showing the cards.
Well, I think transparency has to be with a lot of things, not only with grading, not only with qualification. So for me, the key is to share with your students all this information at the very beginning, not at the end, and share with them and construct with them, if necessary, what we are working with, what are the goals we want to achieve, with what criteria are going to assess, and grading is the last part of all this learning process. So I think transparency must be, and if not, it could be very difficult to make all these things that we have been talking about, this confidence environment, this construction of knowledge, this construction of learning, and this continuous assessment.
Thank you. Professor Hansson, would you like to add something else to this question?
Yeah, I actually answered in the chat this question, and I think you have to show what you are measuring. I mean, otherwise they can't fulfill the criteria. If you're looking for this and this and this, then if they don't know it, they cannot do it. So it's a very important guidance, and I think that is maybe the most important pedagogical guidance. I mean, what am I supposed to do with my thesis, for instance? What should be measured here? Do I need to have write about alternative research methods or not? If the criteria is you should also write about why you deselect methods, then they do it. But if they don't know it, then you cannot reduce the point for them.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, most last question is about the audience is asking you, both of you, about what is your own experience with peer assessment among students? Please, yourself, yeah.
Can I take it? Yeah, I wrote in the chat also that peer assessment is very important for several reasons. I mean, you can reduce the workload for the supervisor by having peer interaction, washing the manuscript in different ways, but also the act of doing peer review is probably you learn more by doing it and get ideas from doing it than maybe receiving it. But it will give an additional second opinion on your work. So we can see that that is really making the manuscript better when it arrives to the supervisor, but also the student get this learning opportunity, and we can do it without involving the supervisor online as well. And we have two types of peer reviews. You can do asynchronous student-driven peer review without the supervisor, and then it's another peer review to be opponent, and then and active participants. Then you're alive, and then you can drive the final seminar with the student. And the supervisor can just do complementary things that the opponent didn't mention. But it's better to let the student work in this way. So I'm very much in favor.
Thank you very much, Professor Cabrera. I know that you are practicing peer assessment in your subjects and your courses, even further than the thesis and so on. What do you think about this question?
Well, my experience is that peer assessment and self-assessment is one of the most difficult assessment strategies or approaches to design for teacher. So you have to invest a lot of time to do it well, to do it right, if you want that it works with students. But if you do, it's an investment that's worth it very, very much. Because for a student, evaluating, assessing is the cognitive process that can contribute the most to the learning process and to the development of the self-regulated learning, that it's one of the competences learn to learn, self-regulated, and etc. that we want to promote. And it is one of the strategies that gets the best of students. Mm-hmm. So I am a fan of peer assessment, but I recognize that it's very hard for a teacher to do it at the very beginning. And then when you know how to do it, when you have the practice and etc., it's easier.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, well, we're approaching the end of this session. I would like to mention not a question, but a comment from someone from the audience, Akel Al-Hamedi, that said, from my simple experience, when I designed an online exam, as we initiated on online teaching, I found out some of them were cheating. As we acquired technical digital skills, I could spend a proper time in designing the test questions in a way that eliminates chances of cheating. The result was great. I could assess the students' competence and learning level in a much scrutinized way. I think that is a good also contribution in the sense that what you are saying, when applied, it works. So it's important for that. Unfortunately, now they are coming other questions, but we don't have time enough for them. You have them in the chat. If you want, you can take them, and then maybe in another occasion we will answer them. I would like to finish with a last question for you both. But first of this, I would like to invite all people to attend to the chapter 3 of this series of webinars between IAU and UOC. And then the third chapter will be on leadership for digital education in higher education, shortcuts and pitfalls. And it will be held on 1st of July. Professor José María Duar from UOC, Professor José Antonio Bowen from the Association of American Colleges and Universities will be moderated by Deborah Arnold from the ONG French Thematic Digital University. We will wait for all of you then. My last question to leave this session is, then do you agree with this sentence that if you want to change the way the students learn, change the way you assess them? Professor Hanson?
I mean, you mean that the learning activities and the learning itself is changed with assessment?
Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's if you do multiple choice, you have one, they will just go for yes and no stuff. If you do another thing, then you have to summarize the literature, and you do this, and you have to present it, you have to read another person's work, and so on. It's a complete different learning task. So examination is deciding the way the student learn, because they want to take the grade. I mean, they want to pass the course.
Thank you, Professor Cabrera.
So that is to just the final word. Stupid examinations will make stupid learning.
Thank you.
Yes, I completely agree. Because students, the first thing they do is to ask how is the assessment in this course? No? What do I have to do to pass the course? So it could be a limitation or an opportunity, because we can decide how is the assessment in this course. So we can make them learn what we want them to learn if we change assessment. So I am completely agree.
Thank you very much for your contribution to this webinar series of the IAU and UOC. I would like to thank you for your very good participation and contribution, and to be strict with the time. And I am sure that after this session, people will come back home with some takeaways, especially to think how to develop smart assessment, producing smart learners too. So thank you very much. Thank you to all of you that have attended to the session, and I will see you in the next chapter of this series. Good afternoon.